the work that I've been doing. Initially, I was working in a transitional housing unit. Our job there, for lack of a better expression, was to help people to transition off the streets and inside for the first time in a very long time. These were folks who had been experiencing chronic cycles of homelessness for a very long time, for various reasons. And I've also worked here at Pacifica Housing as a streets to home support worker. But the needs of the clients varied quite a bit. There were similarities, but there were also very different. In the transitional housing unit, for example, you would have people who perhaps hadn't lived inside for maybe as long as 10 years and had been sleeping what we call rough. So they'd been sleeping in parks, and interacting with other people was very challenging. And so, as an example, someone might move into our transitional housing unit, and even though there would be a bed provided that was very comfortable, these folks would be more comfortable still just sleeping on the floor for a long time, just as an example of how difficult it could be to transition. And then on streets to homes, as a support worker, the folks are more adjusted and ready to live in market rent. So your roles were a little bit different depending on the circumstances.
Simplest of terms, that involves a lot of different things. It involves everything from supporting them with day-to-day tasks, supporting them with advocating on their behalf with different ministries or different bodies, helping them work through issues with their housing, whether it's things that come up through their tenancy, whether it's things like hoarding, and it's also just about being an ear, essentially, to them.
So advocating for them.
Advocating for them, just being a body for them to sound, be a sounding board off of.
Just building relationships with folks. So I know that a lot of the systems that our folks interact with on a daily basis and throughout their lives have been violent or unsafe or oppressive or any combination of those things. And I think a lot of what our initial work is with folks is helping to build relationships where in as much as we're able, we can support safety for them, and we can sort of honor who they are in a way that there's some trust developed, and there's a relationship built there. So I think support often is just the building of relationships, right? Like everything else that we do, that's this underlying thread.
Housing people, no matter what the circumstances are that they're coming into. So the idea is that if they're struggling with mental health issues, if they're struggling with addictions issues, the best possible place for them to start seeking support is to be under a roof, essentially. So working with them to find the right setting, and then housing them, and then just approaching them where they're at, and working with them over time to help them identify things that they may want to change or supports that they may need.
To provide advocacy and support to folks to maintain stable housing.
Okay.
Advocacy support and everything that kind of lands underneath that umbrella. Support gets really nuanced in the work that we do, because we function in the gray a lot of the time, and we work from a pretty broad perspective of what success looks like for our folks. Mm-hmm. For me, I think a big important part of any role that I've been in is to really be aware that being housed is a success for our folks. Just maintaining stable housing is what is my job description. It's what I'm there to support. Whatever role I'm in this organization, what I'm doing,
it's your goal,
is trying to help folks maintain stable housing.
Sure. There's a couple of things. I think, first of all, personally, with working with this demographic, despite the adversity and challenges that many of my clients have faced, I'm always amazed at the resiliency, the strength, the determination, the creativity the ingenuity and imagination of which they've been able to overcome some of those challenges and just and survive. One of the examples being there are these bylaws that move people out of the parks. People are only allowed to sleep in the parks from sunset to sunrise. So at 7 o'clock, the police or the bylaw officers will come along and move people out. And for folks who are not feeling well or have lots of issues, this can be really disruptive. And in some cases, they're moved along and their belongings are taken, and so they can lose things that are very important to them and very hard to replace. So one of my clients came up with a very, I thought, very innovative solution to that. He created his own platform or trailer that he would attach to his bike, and he could put his tent on this platform, put all his belongings inside, so when the police and bylaw officers came in the morning, he could just jump on his bike, roll away, and keep all his belongings. I think the other thing is, a sense of our connectedness, and that we are all connected in this, that the folks that I work with, I could be those folks needing that support and help. It could be my friends, it could be my family. And I think, in that sense, it really strikes with me the importance of why we need to take care of the least fortunate folks in our society, because it could be any one of us.
I have a lot of privilege in my life. I walk around carrying a lot of privilege, and it was tough to see and to realize and to start to understand how intensely oppressive and violent our systems are. To recognize that just going to the hospital or just seeing your doctor or just walking down the street can be such a different experience for people who occupy different identities than I do. Mm-hmm. And how kind of insurmountable that can feel sometimes, and how all-encompassing it can be. So, just like how systemic it truly is.
How to fit yourself back into this box again. Okay. You've been living outside. You've been, you have a community outside, and you've had a certain way of living, and now you're in this very contained setting that has all these norms, and so how do you rectify both of those, and how do you kind of help them sort of become acclimatized to that space now?
So it's much more than finding a home, it's having them adapt to this new way of living.
Yeah.
The other big kind of part that I feel doesn't get recognized enough, or maybe I don't see it enough in the broader conversations about homelessness and housing first and all of those things is just, by the time I meet someone, they have been surviving against pretty insurmountable odds, often for a really long time. They have been functioning within a social structure that has marginalized them to a degree of violence that is almost indescribable in my life. And I think the resiliency and the strength and the capacity to survive that folks come with by the time I meet them is just, I am always in awe of. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional.
That's okay. It's been something that's been mentioned in the other interviews. Yeah.
It's huge, and I think any support that I do has to honor that, and has to be guided and directed by that, because people know their lives, and they know their experiences, and they know what's best for them, and they know how to support themselves way better than I'm ever gonna.
I think the one word that I keep coming back to, no matter what, is resiliency. It's for me, it's been since day one. It's witnessing the resiliency that people have to survive, the creativity that they have in order to get their needs met, and their capacity for laughter, and to share their life experiences, and just the capacity to keep going given the circumstances that they've lived through is I just find it phenomenal. I think it's something that we can all learn from.
You know, we have these conversations about how we support people, and I think we kind of need to broaden that scope and think about how we support people who are already doing a pretty amazing job of supporting themselves in these really huge ways. How criminalized homelessness is, how criminalized poverty and homelessness and even marginalization can be.
Can you speak to what that means?
Yeah, I think I've really started to see that there isn't, well, we don't, it's not illegal to be homeless in Canada, but it is illegal to engage in most of the practices necessary for the survival of folks who are experiencing homelessness, right? Like, it's illegal to be most places and also be homeless. It's illegal. Like, there's all of these ways that we criminalize people for engaging in the practices that they need to survive.
As I said, I feel like there's this dehumanizing, this is something that these people experience over here, and as cliche as it sounds, you know, these folks are our brothers, they're our sisters, they're our parents. One of the things that I've learned through the years of working with folks is that so many of them have so many amazing stories and have lived so many different lives, and the margin of difference between us and, you know, or folks that are housed and folks that have experienced homelessness, the margin of difference I've always found is so minimal. I feel like it's a very thin line. It's a question of I don't know. It's a question of supports. It's a question of mental health. Huge component is mental health.
A real lack of awareness about, you know, mental health, addiction, and homelessness in general. I think also the complexities of the situation is unique to each individual, and what's required in order to support and assist people is definitely misunderstood. But perhaps, possibly, I think the most significant is the vital role of the services of the nonprofit agencies to fill in the gaps in our mental health, addictions, and homelessness systems that are chronically underfunded, and how vitally important they are to the people who are using them and who are using those services. You know, I'm talking specifically, you know, like places like Our Place, shelters, Mustard Seed, providing food banks and things like that, because the people who are accessing these are vulnerable, poor, elderly folks, people with physical and mental disabilities, people who've been afflicted with mental health. You know, someone who has been cruising along their whole life as normal as anybody is, and then have been afflicted by mental health, and now are just trying, these services are just basically keeping them their subsistence level
Right.
for these services, and also working poor folks who you know, are working and really doing their best to try and move themselves up to a state where they can be self-sufficient. And I think if people had a little bit more awareness about that, they would be demanding from their governments that we have better funding and better services in order to support these folks.
Not in my neighborhood. I don't want to see it kind of mentality that you know, people really need people to be moved on in the morning. They're camping here. Mm-hmm. We don't want them camping there. But there's not a lot of conversations going on about, well, then where? You know, and then even more to the point, there's not a lot of conversations going on about, okay, but why?
When I initially graduated from the program, I was volunteering in various different organizations to just get out there, and I was working in the hygiene department at Our Place. And there was this fellow that I got to know quite well, and he was coming in to shower every day and to clean up and do his laundry and things, and he was sleeping in the park. I don't know exactly what his history was. A very clean-cut guy, very well-spoken, but one way or another had wound up and found himself in this situation, and He was a certified chef. He was Red Seal, and he got himself a job. He eventually was working 2 jobs. He would sleep in the park, come in and shower, and go to work. And I remember the day he came in and he said, I won't be coming back because I've found a place and I've got my feet underneath me now. And those are the stories I like to remember and hold on to when things are rough, because that was pretty awesome.
You know, like what are the social systems that exist that are creating homelessness in our society and in Victoria? And you know, if witnessing homelessness is uncomfortable for you to the point that you need it to move along, to where? Like who's comfortable with witnessing homelessness, and should we even get comfortable with that? And if we're not comfortable with that, should we criminalize the behaviors associated with it, or should we be making different kinds of change? Response from people who I say what I do and they say, wow, oh God, that must be so hard. And what they mean is, more often than not, wow, it must be so hard to witness these people. It must be so hard to work with those people. Those people must be really difficult. They mean a lot of stuff about the people that I work with, and they're implying a lot often. And when I ask questions about what they mean, that's usually where it goes to, is those people. And it's just so strange to me because, you know, the hard part about this work for me is not the people. That's the good part. That's the easy part. The folks are amazing. They're astounding. They're resilient. They're exceptional. They're interesting. They're nuanced. They're like every other person in the world. They're nuanced and they're complicated and they're complex. And I get to spend this time with them and I get to know them in this way that I feel so privileged to have the opportunity to do. And when I think about the hard part for me, it's just seeing that systemic oppression all day, every day, and just coming up against it with folks and witnessing people's experiences of that, and just seeing what that looks like and how that plays out every day. I have conversations about how the world that we live in creates the homelessness that we have in Victoria is awesome. That's the conversation I want to have with people. You know, that's the conversation we need to have more. This isn't an individual. This isn't a handful of individuals. This isn't a group of many, many individuals that have a problem. This is a really sick system that creates this over and over. It just reproduces it over and over. And we disrupt that in what we do. Our folks disrupt that in what they do. And we do our best. And I think we work within the system in a way within this organization that I'm just proud of every day. But it's a really sick system. And I think we need to start as individuals and as citizens making changes there.